All right, so just again for the recording, my name is Matt Johnson. I'm a capital project manager with the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, and we're here this evening to talk about the East Silver Spring Neighborhood Greenway. Just to go over a couple of things, this meeting is being recorded, and we will post this recording to the project webpage in a couple of days. So if you have joined via the Zoom, we have two ways for you to communicate with us. If you have a question about something that you hear during the presentation, please enter that using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If it's a minor question or clarifying detail that my colleague Dave can answer, he may answer it by text, by typing it in. If it is a question that requires a larger response, he'll keep it in the queue and I'll answer that during the Q&A portion of the meeting. If you have a comment, we would ask that you please type that comment in the chat window and chat it to Dave Merrihew. We're not going to read those comments, but the chat can be saved, whereas the Q&A cannot be saved. This is how I keep records for anyone who wants to have their comment recorded. You can also feel free, whether you're on the Zoom or whether you're in this meeting in person, you can send your comments to me by emailing me at matt.johnson@montgomerycountymd.gov. For those of you in the room, we also have comment cards in the back that you can fill out if you prefer to write them by hand. You can either leave them here or you can mail them back to us. The address is on the card and postage is not required. People on the Zoom should keep their cameras off to reduce bandwidth of the meeting. If you're having any kind of technical issues, you can message Dave. We do appreciate everyone in the room holding your questions and comments until the end of the meeting. Just a note, because of the technical limitations of this, we have issues with feedback and being able to communicate. The people on the Zoom will not be able to speak directly to the people in the room. If you have a question, we can read it to people in the room. And the people in the room, the audio is actually being transmitted through my AirPods, that's why I'm wearing them, to the Zoom to avoid feedback. So if you speak in the room, I can hear you, but the people on the Zoom cannot hear you. So I will repeat your question, but I'll probably summarize it. If you have a comment, I'm just going to summarize it. So try and keep those short so the people on the Zoom can hear it. So I appreciate your being patient with us as we work through the hybrid meeting format. This is my contact information. Feel free to email me or call me if you have questions or comments about this project at any time. Meaning any time sort of during the calendar, not necessarily like 2 a.m. Probably won't answer the phone at 2 a.m. So just the agenda for this evening. We have a presentation, which is where we are now. We expect this to take about 20 minutes. And then we'll have some questions and comments. And then we will adjourn to let you look at the display boards that are on the right side of the room for your perspective. Again, if you're on the Zoom, all of these display boards are available on the project webpage, and that goes for those of you who are in the room as well. You can also go back home and look at those display boards after the meeting as well. And you can chat one-on-one with the staff here. If you're on the Zoom, the meeting will end at this time before we get to the open house period. So that's our agenda for this evening. The goal for this evening is we are introducing you to the proposed design for the East Silver Spring Neighborhood Greenway, including creating a sidewalk along Grove Street. We do want to get your feedback about the proposed treatments on the corridor. Nothing is carved in stone at this point. We did have some concepts that we brought to you back in May of this year, and we took that feedback to help create what you see on these boards, but it's still very early in the process. We can still make design changes if there's something that you're particularly concerned about. It's not too late for that, so we still want to get your feedback about those issues. So I'm going to just give some background about the project. Some of these slides you may recognize from the previous meeting, but we always have new people who get involved. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So this project is made up of a couple different segments, and they're illustrated in different colors on the map. So in blue, you see in the middle of the image, you see Grove Street. This is representing the area that was part of the Grove Street Neighborhood Greenway pilot, which was we started the planning for back in 2020 in this very room. You may remember it. It was my last community meeting in person before the pandemic. Didn't know that at the time, but it turned out to be the case, and we had a great crowd here. That was long before we had the idea to allow you to have a virtual meeting, which is probably why the crowd's a little smaller today, because some of you are joining online. So that project, we did some pilot treatments to test out different ideas to see kind of how they worked and collect data. And if you were at the last presentation, you would have seen that information, and that presentation is available on our webpage, so you can go back and look at the data that we collected. Additionally, the neighborhood greenway is being extended. That's why it's called the East Silver Spring Neighborhood Greenway now, because it's longer than Grove Street. It's being extended to the north along Bonifant and Cedar Street, which you can see in green here. and also to the south in green along Woodbury Drive. And there's a segment along Sligo Avenue, which would be a shared use path, not a neighborhood greenway. It's part of the neighborhood greenway corridor, but it won't be a shared facility where you're biking in the street. You'll be on the side of the street. And then we also have included a sidewalk along Houston Street based on comments that we have received throughout the length of this project. So I want to point out that this is part of a growing network in Silver Spring. This is not an isolated piece of the network, and this is not just a bike project, it's a bicycle and pedestrian project. But I want to talk about what's happening throughout Silver Spring. So we already have a network of separated bike lanes and other facilities that have been built largely on the north side of downtown. You can see the Spring Street, Cedar Street separated bike lanes along the northern edge of downtown, which do connect at the north end of Cedar Street, the north in the neighborhood at least. And also the separated bike lanes along Wayne Avenue and 2nd Avenue that get you over towards Silver Spring Metro. In addition to that, there are projects that are under construction. The Capitol Crescent Trail from Silver Spring Metro to Bethesda and the Silver Spring Green Trail from essentially from Whole Foods out to Sligo Creek are being constructed as part of the Purple Line project. And those will provide off-street trails in the case of the Capitol Crescent Trail and separate right-of-way, and in the case of the Silver Spring Green Trail next to Wayne Avenue. And the Metropolitan Branch Trail, you can see in the bottom from Silver Spring Metro down to Montgomery College, under construction, which will help to connect the existing segment of the Metropolitan Branch Trail, which is just at the very bottom of your screen, that solid line there, which goes down as far as the DC line. The Metropolitan Branch Trail will eventually provide an off-street connection all the way to Union Station in Washington, DC. The section from Fort Totten down to Union Station has been completed, and DDOT, which is our counterpart in the District of Columbia, is currently working to fill the gap between Fort Totten and the Montgomery County line. Additionally, the Fenton Street cycle track, which you can see in dashed orange there, we expect to go to construction next year, and that will provide another part of the connection, along with also connecting, you can kind of see there's a dashed line along Fenton Street there, a connection to the Metropolitan Branch Trail next to the self-storage facility south of Burlington Avenue. And then we have some additional projects along Dixon Avenue and from Wayne Avenue down to Silver Spring Avenue, and along 13th Street and Burlington Avenue, which are in design, which will help to connect additional parts of downtown Silver Spring to the low-stress network that's being constructed. So I see you're taking pictures. That's great. These are all available on the webpage as well. So if you want to download later, you can get high resolution, but it's also not a problem to take pictures. So that's kind of an overview of what's happening outside of the neighborhood and how this connects to it. So a neighborhood greenway, what is it? You've seen this, if you've been involved in these meetings, you have seen this slide many, many times. I always include it though, because again, we do have new people who join. A neighborhood greenway is a street that is designed to give walking and biking priority and to reduce vehicle speed and volume. And the tools that we can use to create a neighborhood greenway include things like signs, pavement markings, speed countermeasures, volume management measures to discourage cut-through trips by vehicles, and to create safe, convenient crossings of arterial streets for bicyclists and pedestrians. And some of these elements you will be seeing as part of the East Silver Spring Neighborhood Greenway. And I apologize, every time someone joins this meeting, these meeting controls appear, and I can't do anything to stop that. These are just some examples. This slide has been repeated. You've seen it before. There's also a version of it over there. It's a little bit smaller, but basically things like speed cushions or speed humps, neighborhood traffic circles, chicanes. Those are speed treatments that you might see in a neighborhood greenway in general. Not necessarily this one, but just in general. Diversionary treatments, we're not proposing any diversionary treatments, but this is a common treatment for neighborhood greenways, but again, not contemplated as part of this project. And as we go over what the project includes, again, we have the segment here, you see in this slide, I just illustrated in black here, the connections at the south end of the Metropolitan Branch Trail and the Burlington Avenue Bikeway, and at the north end of the Silver Spring Green Trail and the Spring Street, Cedar Street separated bike lanes. So I'm going to start at the south end of the project and kind of walk our way north to go over what you're going to see. All of these, again, the slide presentations on our website, all the display boards are on the website as well. But if you're here in the meeting, you can see those by walking over to your right side of the room and looking at those. And again, we'll be available to talk after the meeting. So Woodbury Drive runs from Fenton Street up to Sligo Avenue here. It's about 3 short blocks. Mostly what we are proposing along Woodbury Drive are signage and wayfinding treatments. Basically, like we'll have some bike route signs and maybe some sharrows that help guide bicyclists through the neighborhood. We are proposing that the big open space at Violet and Woodbury and Richmond be converted into a circle to help sort of rationalize that space and make it a little bit less chaotic. And that's one of the options. We do have another option as well. So we have, this is that potential circle treatment there, made a little bit bigger for you on the screen. And you can see we still have plenty of space for drivers to circulate, but there would be a green space to kind of help break that up. Right now, because the streets come in at different angles, it might be a little confusing for someone who's going north on Woodbury Drive, who wants to continue on Woodbury Drive, but someone going south is turning onto Violet Place. It might be a little confusing as to where exactly you should position yourself, because you're coming in at different angles. It's just a big wide space. We know that from research that big wide open spaces encourage just faster driving, and it's just not well marked. So we feel like a roundabout might be one way to help reduce the amount of space there that has pedestrians and cyclists open to exposure. However, we have heard some people in the neighborhood who are not happy about the idea of a roundabout there, or a circle there. And so one of the alternatives would be to take that space and instead of putting the green space in the middle, putting the green space on the edges and making it sort of just like a normal street through here with two closely spaced intersections. And we potentially could use the outside for some stormwater management best practices. I do want to point out that impervious surface is a major impediment to the health of places like Sligo Creek, because all that water that falls on pavement runs directly to the creek. I know you may see it going to a storm sewer, but those storm sewers go directly to Sligo Creek. They don't go to Blue Plains to get treated. They go directly to Sligo Creek. They just go downhill. So trying to treat that water, reducing the amount of water will help to reduce erosion and will help to reduce flooding events in Sligo Creek. I know this is just a small piece, but every little piece that we can do helps to reduce our permeant surface. So that's one of the options. And we would love to hear your feedback, especially if you live in this area, as whether you prefer the circle version or the alternate version here. And this is not part of this project. I just want to show it for context. This is part of the Fenton Street Cycle Track project, but there will be a connection down here. This shared use path down here in the north is to the right in the image, just for reference here, but to the northeast corner of Philadelphia and Fenton Street, which is the bottom right corner of this image. There's a shared use path that will connect over to the hammerhead, the end of Woodbury Drive. It's called the hammerhead. And that will allow pedestrians and cyclists to easily get to the intersection and cross Fenton Street or Burlington Avenue and 13th Street. Sorry, Burlington Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue. On Sligo Avenue, we have an issue where the neighborhood greenway shifts from Woodbury Drive to Grove Street, and they're not directly adjacent to each other. They're offset. And Sligo Avenue is not the kind of street that we can really make comfortable for cyclists and pedestrians to share with vehicles. And so what we're proposing is to have the neighborhood greenway cross over Sligo Avenue at Woodbury Drive with some form of pedestrian signal. It would not likely be a full 3-color signal, but likely what's called a pedestrian hybrid beacon or a hawk signal. You may have seen those, or some other kind of device to stop traffic on Sligo Avenue for pedestrians and cyclists, and then a shared use path along the north side of Sligo Avenue from Woodbury Drive to Grove Street to make that connection. And this is a picture that shows the existing condition along the north sidewalk. You can see we have the new art space development where the police department used to be, and a relatively narrow sidewalk here on the north side of Sligo Avenue. And we're proposing to widen that so that there's enough space for cyclists and pedestrians to share to get between Grove Street and Woodbury. And you can also see in the rendering, there's a signal shown at Woodbury Drive. As we move further north to Grove Street, we did hear a lot of support for many of the treatments that were piloted on Grove Street, especially the walking lane, which is very popular. So we are proposing to make the speed humps, the choker, there's one choker on the north of Easley Street, and the curb extensions on the side streets. So they're currently shown with paint, they're currently done with paint and flex posts on the east-west streets to make those permanent, and also to create a permanent walking space. So this is an example showing the bump out. So again, north is to the right in this image because the plans are generally oriented that direction. But you can see here we have these bump outs to narrow, for in this case, Thayer Avenue, but for all the east-west streets, to narrow them at the intersection so that there is reduced exposure for pedestrians crossing the street. It also makes the intersection feel narrower, which will be more inducive of drivers to stop at the stop signs here. We are going to remove this mini roundabout at Silver Spring Avenue. Just for those of you who are on the Zoom, there's been some cheering in the room. And some booing, yes. So the mini roundabout, the reason we tried it here was to see if it would improve compliance with the stop signs, because you at least have to kind of swerve a little bit to go. You can't go straight across. But it really is, it's just the intersection is not quite big enough to accommodate this kind of treatment. And it's very difficult for especially larger vehicles to make left turns. Through movements are okay, but left turns get really challenging. So we are going to remove this. But stay tuned to later in the presentation. Along Grove Street, we are proposing to build a real sidewalk along Grove Street in order to deal with the fire department clearance issues. So one of the compromises we had to make, you'll see that the yellow sort of surface here is what we call a low profile barrier. And this is done to allow the fire department to mount this in an emergency because the street was just not quite wide enough when cars were parked there to allow the fire department to feel comfortable. It technically was wide enough, but they just wanted a little extra space in case people weren't parked against the curb. And so basically we needed about 2 feet if we were going to put a real curb in there. We needed about 2 extra feet. So what we're proposing to do is build a sidewalk, and 2 of the feet of that sidewalk, which is about 40% of it, will be behind the existing curb. So it's on county property, it's on the county right of way, but it'll be behind the curb. And you can kind of see this red dashed line kind of illustrates a little bit behind the curb. But the rest of the sidewalk, 3.5 feet, will be in what's currently the road. And then these barriers will get removed, and the street will basically get up 2 feet wider than it is today for cars. But we'll have a raised sidewalk that is much harder for people to drive on than the current walking lane is. I won't say impossible, because where there's a will, there's a way, and SUVs make a lot of things possible. So this is just a rendering or a picture showing Grove Street as it is today. Well, not today because it's dark and cold, but at some point recently. And then a rendering showing what the sidewalk could look like on the west side of Grove Street. As we move further north up to Bonifant Street, this is where we have the choker that I was mentioning here. The reason we installed the choker, which is currently paint and flex post, we're proposing to replace with concrete, is Grove Street's pretty narrow when there are parked cars. But when everyone's at work and there aren't any cars on Grove Street, it's wide enough that people can go pretty fast. And so the idea of the choker here is just to have at least one place where you have to slow down, yield to oncoming traffic if there is anyone coming southbound or northbound, depending on who gets there first. So it's just a way to kind of keep the street narrow even when there aren't parked cars there. We also are showing an extension of the northern sidewalk along Bonifant Street from where it currently ends, kind of mid-block, down to the intersection of Grove Street. We're not showing it continuing further west because there's a pretty big tree at the north end of Grove Street that we don't want to remove. And then we are proposing to make the bump out at Hankin and Grove and Bonifant permanent. And I have a rendering of it on the next slide here, so you can see what it looks like today. Before, this is all just wide open. And we did add the paint and flex post bump out here, curb extension here. We have heard some people say, oh, well, people turning right drive through the crosswalk to get there. And I'm sure that does happen. That's part of the hazard of doing interim treatments, is it's a little harder to prevent either intentional or unintentional bad behavior. But by building a real curb extension there, it will become pretty clear that you're not supposed to drive there. Again, where there's a will, there's a way. Or I like to say I have 2 really amazing cats. Cars are like cats. If they fit, they sit. So that's, I'm sure you all live in an urban area. You're familiar with that. Seeing cars wherever they will fit, you'll find them parked. So we have heard some concerns about people being able to turn from Grove onto Hankin. We've done some what's called auto turn analysis to show that it is possible. We understand those concerns, and if it's really a challenge for you, I would encourage you to drive around to Houston and come in Hankin that side, because this is really about, this pedestrian exposure is really, really long. So if you're walking across it, it's a very long place to just feel like, hey, a car could just whip through here and not even see me. Especially on a night like tonight, it gets dark at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the winter. I had to dress up. I'm wearing navy slacks and a black wool coat. I actually put my vest that I wear when I go out for field work, I put it on today because it's dark in some of these neighborhoods. And so that's a lot of exposure that we want to try and reduce. As we get to the Bonifant Cedar intersection, this intersection is a very odd intersection with 5.5 legs if we count Dartmouth. And so we're proposing to put kind of an oblong roundabout. There's more space in this intersection than there is at the Silver Spring Grove intersection, so this one should function better. This will be a mountable, what's what we call an apron, a mountable apron. So trucks and buses would probably have to drive at least partway over this, but cars would certainly wouldn't feel comfortable to do it in a car. Of course, again, where there's a will, there's a way, you can. But we have seen some bad behavior here, drivers running the stop sign, and the visibility here is really poor if you're coming down Bonifant. And so this is just meant to kind of encourage people to at least slow down, hopefully stop, but at least slow down at this intersection. And so that's what we're proposing there. It'll be a little different than what you currently see at Grove and Silver Spring. When we get to Cedar Street, we are proposing to flip the parking to the east side of the street. It's currently on the west side of the street. So the current setup is we have a northbound travel lane then a southbound bike lane, and then northbound parking. And so that means if you're biking southbound on Cedar Street, you're kind of sandwiched between cars going the opposite direction from you, and it doesn't feel real comfortable. But we think that there's some other benefits to doing this. So we are aware that there was recently a wrong way car crash earlier this month on this block of Cedar Street. We've heard that this is a problem with, it's not just this particular accident, but that it's been a recurring problem. And so we think that flipping the bike lane will flipping the parking in the bike lane will help somewhat. So this is a picture looking down Cedar Street from Wayne Avenue. So we're looking south on Cedar Street from Wayne Avenue. And I think what you'll see is, if I were to put dimensions on here, what I'll show you is that we have an 11-foot northbound travel lane. And then we have a 5-foot southbound bike lane and a 7-foot northbound parking lane. And 5 plus 7 is 12, which means that center line is just slightly on the east side of halfway across the roadway. So if I go back to this previous slide where the dimensions aren't shown, if you're not looking carefully, that center line is right in the middle of the road, and it could very easily look like it's a two-way street. And this is exacerbated by the fact that this island is offset. The island is offset by 5 feet. Now, why is that the case? The case is because 15 years ago when this bike lane was installed, originally it was supposed to be against the curb where we're proposing to put it now. And if that had been the case, the parking would have been on this side, and this would have been the center line right here. This would have been the left edge of that northbound travel lane. So the median would have lined up. And the median was constructed, and then there was some opposition in the neighborhood, and we went back to the drawing board and did what was installed here. But that means the median was offset. So we think that this might be contributing to at least somewhat the wrong way driving problem, at least for people who are doing it accidentally. Again, there's a will, there's a way. We can't always stop people who are intentionally doing it the wrong way, but we think this might be part of the issue. Now, the other thing that we've asked, Wayne Avenue, it's not signposted, but it is a state highway. It's Maryland 594A. We have asked the State Highway Administration to go out and look at the no left and no right turn signs that are mounted on the mast arms above the roadway where the signals are, to check to see if they're still retroreflective and visible at night. One of the issues with old signs is they just don't become as reflective as they used to be, and maybe at night the glare from the signals or the street lights makes it so it's hard for you to see them, so drivers don't realize that that's the problem. We've also asked them to consider replacing if you're going toward Georgia Avenue, the green ball, the circular signal we call a green ball, the leftmost one with an up arrow, green up arrow. And if you're going towards Slugger Parkway, the right one with an up arrow, which is very standard in DC and other jurisdictions when you have a one-way street. The signal closest to that one-way street that you can't turn down has an up arrow instead of a green ball, just to reinforce that you can't turn there. So we've asked them to look at that. We don't have control over those signals, so it's going to be up to the state, but we have asked them to look at that based on that crash that happened. Now, I know there was an email that went around. I responded to that email. I don't know if my response to that email got sent to the list or not. But from the police report, it appears that the driver who crashed actually turned off of Wayne Avenue and did not go straight across from Cedar Street, from Silver Spring. They actually turned off of Wayne Avenue. So just for reference, they were not drunk, but they were on their phone. So remember, put the phone down when you're driving. You can always do the call later. Now, one of the other things we think might help, and this is not shown here because we decided to work on this after hearing about this crash. This is like very recent, but there's a big right turn bay that exists. I'll just go back so you can see there's a big right turn bay here. You can't turn right on red here anyway. We don't really need this right turn space. So if we were to sort of fill this in so that there's the shadow of the parking lane, this becomes only 11 to 12 feet wide here, which is only one lane wide. It's going to be really clear that only one car is supposed to go here. I will say I live on a one-way street, so I live in DC. I live on a one-way street. On my way to this meeting, I saw a driver going the wrong way down the street. So again, confused, you get honked at, he turned around, it's fine, it happens. But this will make it a lot less likely for this to happen. Now, this is sort of a longer term item that probably will not happen as part of this project. I want to be candid because the purple line is impacting that curb line along Cedar. So we likely can't do any of this until after the purple line is completed, but we are going to talk to the purple line and see if there's any way possible to maybe modify that curb work. But there are some storm drains there, so it's not as simple as just going out there and doing it. So that is one complicating factor. But these are just some ideas that we have. Nothing is carved in stone. I did this in PowerPoint last week, so if you have comments or thoughts about this, please let's hear them because it's not set in stone clearly. And this is just kind of illustrating what I was just talking about, showing kind of in case it wasn't clear. And then we move on to Houston Street. Houston Street, the main treatment here is to add a sidewalk along the west side of Houston Street. I just want to point out that one of the reasons that the Houston Street was included was when the Grove Street pilot happened. We did do traffic counts on Grove and Houston and Fenton and all the east-west streets. There was a huge decrease in traffic on Grove Street. And those of you on Grove, I'm sure, noticed that. I see someone, we have some, I don't know what we call it, a fist bump from one of the neighbors here. We did see an increase, however, on Houston. Now, the increase on Houston was much less than the decrease on Grove. So most of the traffic just disappeared, but some of the traffic went to Houston. We heard from people on Houston who said, you're just pushing the problem over here, and we don't have a sidewalk either, so we're planning to build a sidewalk here. Because our goal is not to just push the problem somewhere else. The problem is to try and solve the problems, or at least address them as best we can. So that's pretty much what we're talking about with this project. Again, nothing set in stone. We want to hear your comments and your feedback. So what's the next step? Based on the feedback that we hope to get, we will work to revise these plans. And we want to start construction on as much of this as we can, as soon as we can. Part of that, I don't want to sugarcoat things, part of that is because the treatments on Grove Street that are pilots, they're not designed to be long-term, and they are not particularly snowplow proof. Now, we've been lucky. The last 3 years, we haven't had any major snow events. I'm knocking on wood. For those of you who know, I'm knocking on wood. They're saying it's supposed to be a pretty snowy winter this year. So the treatments that we put on Grove were custom built. They're very expensive. There's a lead time. If they were to get ripped out by a snowplow and I was to order them in April, we probably wouldn't have them until November anyway, which we might be able to get to construction by then. So if we lose any elements of the temporary pilot project during this winter, it's unlikely that they'll be replaced because the lead time to replace them is a while. So we want to try and keep the walking lane in place as best we can. We also want to get a sidewalk out there as soon as we can. So we are going to try and move forward as fast as we can. But this project may happen not all at once. It may happen in little bits and pieces as we have these. The Syracuse path along Sligo Avenue, for example, is probably going to be a longer term, not a super long term, but a longer term item. The signal at Woodbury to get pedestrians across may take a little bit longer. So I just want to be realistic, but we are trying to move forward with as much of this as we can, as soon as we can. With that, we're going to move into the public comments period. So I just want to remind everyone, I don't have to remind this community because you guys are great. I've been out here in this community many times, so please be respectful of the other people in the meeting and try and keep your comments concise. If you're in the room and you would like to ask a question or make a comment, you can, don't do it now, but you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. If you're in the Zoom, you can type your question in the Q&A field. If you have a comment, we'd ask you to send that comment in the chat, Dave Merrihew, or email it to me, matt.johnson@montgomerycountymd.gov. The reason for that is because, again, we can save the chat, we can't save the Q&A, which is something we discovered at the last meeting. So if it's a comment you want recorded, put it in the chat. If it's a question you want answered, put it in the Q&A. For those of you who are in the room, just for everyone's reference, and we have had people join the Zoom since we said this at the beginning, the only way people in the Zoom are getting audio is from my AirPods, not from this microphone. It's not connected to the Zoom. So if you say something and you want the people on the Zoom to hear it, I have to repeat it. So if you give me like a 4-minute comment, I'm going to try and summarize it as best I can, but it's going to be much less than 4 minutes when I do it. So try and keep it concise. The record is what you submit as written comments. So even if you tell me a comment here, I'm going to summarize that in the recording, but your full comment will not be recorded because we don't have audio of you. We only have audio of me. Just one of the limitations we have of the Zoom, of this hybrid format. So I would still encourage you, if you make a comment to me, I appreciate that, but please write it down. My memory is good, but it's not that great. So please write it down, email it to me. We have comment cards in the back. You know, I like to say any comments are fair comments. Let's try and keep it to this project, okay? We would find it particularly helpful if you have thoughts on specific elements of the design, like you don't like the sidewalk in front of this house, or you don't like the roundabout at Cedar Street, whatever your comments are. If you have specific items, that's really helppful. And if there's anything else you think we need to know, you say you forgot about the tree in front of 7300. What are you going to do about that? So that's the sort of stuff that we would like to hear. If you can get those comments to us by December 15th, that's the end of this week plus 2 more weeks. And I always set my comment deadlines on Friday because if you get them in, I'm not going to do anything Friday after 5 p.m. So if you get them in on the weekend, I'll still check them. But try and get them in by December 15th, Friday, December 15th. Email is preferred. You can also mail them to me by postal mail, by emailing, or by mailing them to MCDOT Transportation Engineering, 100 Edison Park Drive, 4th floor, Southeast Gaithersburg, Maryland, 20878. So let me just ask Dave if we have any Do we have any questions? Okay, I'm going to start here, and if you have a question or comment in the room, just raise your hand and I'll get to you next. So anonymous participant says, could you explain what will be happening on Fenton Street? That would by very quickly. Yes, we have a separate project. Many of you I recognize from those meetings as well, because these are very related projects. The Fenton Street Cycle Track project, there's a lot of information available on our webpage. It's a proposal to build a two-way cycle track on the west side of Fenton Street from Burlington Avenue, Maryland 410, up to Cameron Street, where it continues as we call the Cameron to Plant Place Bikeway, which was constructed in 2022. It will continue to the south with the Metropolitan Branch Trail to DC. That project is way too complicated to get into right now, but we have lots of information on our project webpage. You can certainly email me whoever asked this question, you can certainly email me and I'm happy to get you more information. The status of that project is we're currently just about done with design. We're working on final utility relocation locations. So we have to deal with many utilities. I know when you go out to Fenton Street, you look down and you just see pavement. What I do is I look down and I see a gas line and a water line and a fiber optic line and a telephone line and a power line and an electric transmission line and many more things. So we have to do utility relocations, and those things have to be a certain distance from each other. And so it gets really complicated. So right now we're working with WSSC, Pepco, and Washington Gas to finalize the locations of some of those relocations. And once that's done, we'll have the final plans. We're also working on getting ready to start some right-of-way acquisition. It's very minor right-of-way acquisitions along the corridor. We're not going to tear anything down. It's just in some cases you think you're walking on the sidewalk. It looks like the sidewalk to you, but it's actually on private property along a lot of Fenton Street. And so there's some areas where we have to do some acquisitions. Legally, we're required the accessible path has to be within the right-of-way legally. And so there's some places where we just have to acquire it, even though it's really not going to change what's actually out there in real life. This needs to be publicly owned for the purposes of accessibility. So that's Fenton. We are hoping to go to construction summer, fall of 2024. So hopefully this time next year, we'll be under construction. But there's still a lot of moving parts. We still have to get permits from State Highway and other agencies. So there's still a lot of moving parts, but we're working really hard. So that was the first question. Are there any in the room? Yes, right here. Yes, I can go back to that slide. Right about, here, there we go. Okay. Yep. Okay, so the question for those of you on the Zoom, and in case anyone in the room didn't hear it, is we have these curb extensions or bump outs that are paint and flex post that are not the roundabout, but on the edge here, you can kind of see one here. What is the purpose of these? That's the question. What's the purpose of these? The purpose of these is there are two purposes of these. The first is to narrow the intersection at the crosswalk location to reduce what we call exposure. So exposure is how much distance as a pedestrian, you are exposed to traffic while you're crossing the street. So if we have like a 2-lane street, we would say the exposure is probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 24 feet because we have 12-foot travel lanes, 2 of them, that's 24 feet. But if you have parking, there's another 8 feet on each side. So now we've gone from 24 feet to, oh, you're going to make me do math, are you? 40 feet, I think. So that 40 feet is a lot of exposure. And there's no one parked in the crosswalk, but we typically just have the curb go straight. And so it's, well, yes, so hold on. But you're right, there's no parking. The comment was there's no parking there. You're right, there's no parking there, but you still have to cross that expanse of asphalt, even though there's no one parked there. So that's additional exposure. So when someone turns right, they can drive through that space. And so this narrows the intersection, it reduces the exposure. Narrowing also psychologically, like we drive we have brains, we think, we make conscious decisions, but we also make unconscious decisions when we drive. There's a lot of psychology that goes into driving because our brains were not evolved to operate a vehicle at 50 miles an hour. Our brains were never evolved to go that fast. And so psychologically, big wide open spaces make you drive faster, narrow spaces make you drive slower. So narrowing it increases the chance that a driver is actually going to stop for pedestrians, or in this case for the stop sign. That's one of the reasons. The second reason is something called daylighting. Daylighting is one of the most important things that we can do to improve pedestrian safety. The city of Hoboken in New Jersey, across the Hudson from New York, did daylighting throughout the city, and they haven't had a traffic death in like 5 years now, okay? So what daylighting means is, you said, what if a moving truck needs to park there, a delivery truck needs to park there? If FedEx parks right here, or UPS or DHL, I don't want to call anybody out, if they park right here and I'm trying to cross the street, I have a truck right here, and that means that you, driving down the street, can't see me until I step right out from in front of that FedEx truck, and that's right in front of you. So daylighting means making it so that the drivers can actually see the pedestrians before they even leave the sidewalk. And if I don't put something there to stop there, then people will park there. You're right, it's a no parking zone. It's not no parking, but FedEx is okay. It really is no parking because whenever anybody parks within 15 feet of an intersection, they block sight lines. So yes, the flex posts are going to go away to answer your question, but it's not going to be answering it in the way you like, because we're actually going to replace it with a curb and narrowing the street with concrete. So it makes it even harder for people to park there. So if there's a need for more loading, we can look at maybe we need to have a no parking zone or a loading zone before you get to that bump out. So someone can pull off before they get to the intersection. But really, I suspect, I haven't been through here during the day when FedEx might be delivering in a while, but I suspect that there's plenty of curb space available somewhere if someone wants to pull over. Maybe it's not right in front of your house. Maybe FedEx doesn't want to, or UPS or DHL or whoever, doesn't want to park in front of the next house because they have to walk further. But the curbs here are not fully parked. Just for reference, I live in DuPont Circle. Our curbs are like 98% parked most of the time. And I think that's probably not, there are generally some places someone can pull over, but this is about pedestrian safety and bicyclist safety. I'm going to see if there are any other Zoom questions. Let's see. I'm going to have a question from Jennifer Toole here. One of the reasons motor vehicles are going so slow on Grove Street today is because it's so narrow. This makes it ideal for bicycling. Have you thought about the impact of the extra 2 feet of width on speeds and the trade-offs for safety for bicyclists and pedestrians across this road? That's a great question, Jennifer. Unfortunately, what I think doesn't matter because if we keep it the same width and put the sidewalk in, the fire department won't approve it. So yes, making it 2 feet wider will probably have a marginal increase effect on increased speed. But if we don't do that, it won't happen. So sometimes we have to make compromises in the design to make it possible. So I think having a sidewalk here is better than having a walking lane, which is hopefully going to survive this winter. Pray for global warming, right, this year. Just this year, though. Yes. So the question is, the map says there's a couple of utility poles that need to be relocated as part of the sidewalk project on Grove. And the question is, where are we going to put them? I don't know if we have answered that yet. This stage of design is identifying issues. It's not always about solving the issues, but you're right. They will have to go somewhere, and we will have to work with Pepco and the other. Pepco is just for reference. We call them telephone poles. They're usually owned by the power company. They're usually owned by, in this case, Pepco. And all the other utilities are tenants. They pay Pepco rent. So Verizon will pay Pepco rent to be on those poles. Steve wants to answer that. I'm going to have to repeat. Yeah. So I have to repeat Steve's answer for the people on the Zoom. The answer is the poles are probably not going to move very far, but the issue is the sidewalk has to be at least 4 feet wide to meet ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act standards. And right now the poles are frequently right in the middle of the sidewalk. So it might also be possible that if we can't move the pole, if it's too difficult, we could make the sidewalk go around the pole on the street side, and maybe we just have to block off parking on the opposite side from the sidewalk in that location, so we still maintain the amount of width that the fire department needs while not having to relocate the pole. So we're willing to be flexible and look at these issues. We just haven't quite gotten that far along in the process. Yeah. Right. The comment is that some of the poles are right next to the wall, the retaining walls, and we understand if you're a property owner on Grove Street, we understand. We're not trying to. We don't want to put the poles in your yard. We just need to find a place where they're not in the middle of the sidewalk. So we will work with you on those as well. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of hands right here. Okay, so the question is, we're building a shared use path on the north side of Sligo Avenue between Grove and Woodbury. Why does that path not continue west one more block to Fenton Street and connect to the Fenton Street cycle track? It's a great comment. We did think about doing it. There's something in my field that we call scope creep, and that's basically what this is. So we have a limited budget. If we were to do that, I'm not saying it can never happen, but there are some property acquisitions that would need to happen between Woodbury and Fenton, and that would be expensive and time consuming, and it may be worthwhile as a separate project, but we're not including it as part of this project. So it's basically beyond the scope of this project. I think it could be worthwhile to consider that at some point. And you should absolutely write that comment down and email it to me so we have a record of it. That goes for everyone. I'm not picking on him. Everyone, write your comment down. But that's a great idea. We have actually talked about that. It's just not going to be part of the scope of this particular project. I'm going to take a question from the Zoom if we have one. Let's see. From Jane, how are we doing on our? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Well, it's a question anyway. How are we doing on our request to have Grove added to the sidewalk? The shoveled sidewalk list. I don't deal with, my division doesn't deal with maintenance. I know that we have heard from some people who don't like the idea of a sidewalk because you're required to shovel sidewalks after a snowfall. And what I would say is, I understand. Well, I'm from Georgia, just a little more about me. I'm from Georgia. When I moved here and lived, my second year I lived here, I lived in a row house in Petworth, and I bought a snow shovel because I was so excited to shovel the sidewalk. But I get that it's not fun, right? I get that it's not fun for everyone. I was just so excited to be able to do this because we never had shovelable snow. I didn't have sidewalks either for that matter when I was around. But I was excited about it. But I understand it's a pain, and what I would say is we encourage you to shovel your sidewalks. The county cannot shovel every sidewalk on the county. We do shovel some important ones. It's important for you to do that. But also, I'm not aware of anyone getting fined for not doing it. It's the right thing to do, but we should not build a sidewalk because you have to go out and shovel it 3 times a year, right? I get it, but there are many other days of the year. You know, how many is 360-ish? We don't get a lot of snow in Maryland these days. 360-ish days a year where you don't have to shovel it, and that is a day when someone's child can walk to school on that sidewalk, or a person who has a vision disability can get around without walking on the street. Because it's not just about able-bodied people. There are people who have disabilities who also want to be able to get around the neighborhood safely. So right here in the front row. Okay, so the question is the connection between the hammerhead on Woodbury, the end of Woodbury, and Fenton Street. So we have a separate project that is going to construction, hopefully, knock on wood, fingers crossed, next summer, which will rebuild this intersection. So what you see here, this kind of cross-hatched white area over here, this is where the ramp currently is. The sidewalk that you currently are sort of dumped out to is right here. And that's going away. This path is actually going to go right to the place where the pedestrian push button is, where you can cross the street, or you can turn left or right. So we're removing this. Oh, well, it's not a term, it's not an official term, but the hot right. We're removing that one. We're removing this one. This was this intersection came to being, just for a history lesson. This intersection came to being as it is today in 1960. Fenton Street used to end at Sligo Avenue, and it was extended in 1960 down to Philadelphia Avenue, which used to go straight across, as you can imagine. And this part of Fenton actually used to be called Woodbury also. Woodbury Drive used to continue down to Montgomery College, what's now Montgomery College. It's now called Fenton Street. So that's why this intersection looks like this. It used to be a very weird intersection with a roundabout and 5 legs, and then it got a 7th leg, and 2 of the legs were removed. So now it's a 4-way intersection. That math works, trust me. I'm sure you can do it. But so we're dramatically improving this connection and the intersection to improve safety here, and we hope that will go to construction next summer. So it's almost 8 o'clock. So I'm going to have we have about 5 minutes, and I want to break so we can go to the board and you can talk to us one-on-one in the back there, sir. Yes, yes, you. Yep. I was trying to see if I had an image of that. I don't have that that graphic here on this presentation, but yeah. So the question is, I forget the house number. So basically, on the south side of Sligo Avenue between Woodbury and Grove, there are some single-family houses, and we're proposing to have a concrete bump out just west of the intersection with Grove. I think I believe we added that mainly to improve visibility for that crosswalk and for the bus stop that's there. And the issue is the question / comment is it's going to remove parking from those houses, and the parking is already really tight there. So that's a great comment. Like I said, nothing's carved in stone, so we would love to hear more from you and put that in writing, and we'll take a look at that. So thank you. And if you already have a comment card filled out, that's great. Right here. Yeah, you. And what that's Bonifant and what street? Right. So the question / comment is, can we address the intersection of Bonifant and Queen Anne's, which is the next intersection to the east on Bonifant Street? That's beyond the scope of this project, but we do have a traffic division which works on doing sort of spot improvements like that. So if you write that comment down to me, I will forward it to them, and they can take a look at that. So that's another reason to write these comments down, because sometimes if they're, especially if they're out of scope, I can just send them to the right person. So that's another reason. So let me take, let's see what time it is. Let's take one more question from the Zoom and then one more question from in here. So, okay, it looks like we don't have any more questions in the Zoom. So, second row right here. Yep. Yeah. So so the question is, would either the circle or non-circle alternative for the Woodbury Violet Richmond intersection would add stop signs for the approaches. The non-circle alternative, we are showing stop bars, we are showing stop signs. I would imagine we probably wouldn't put a stop sign for the interior intersections, just that we might, I don't know. We can certainly discuss that. And for the circle, I think the intent still is to have stop signs, even though it's a circle. Not all circles are yield circles. We could stop and then circulate. So I think the intent is to have stop signs on all those legs, but we certainly want to get those comments. Now I'll take one more question since we didn't get a question from the Zoom. Yeah, right here. So the question is, question / comment is, this person is in favor of the new sidewalk on Houston Street, but how does adding a sidewalk address the traffic change on Houston Street, the traffic that was added to Houston? What I would say is that the additional traffic on Houston Street it's pretty small. I know if you live on Houston Street, it doesn't feel like small, but it's only about 200 cars per day on average, which is still a decent amount. The main reason for proposing a sidewalk was that was the big thing that we heard from most Houston Street residents was, hey, we need a sidewalk. And it's not because the sidewalk's not intended to get cars off of Houston Street. The intent is to get pedestrians a place to walk that's not with all these additional cars. And so that's the purpose of the sidewalk is not to get cars off of Houston Street, it's to allow pedestrians to walk on the sidewalk away from all those new cars that are there. So hopefully over time, the traffic will stabilize with these new treatments. Ideally, we don't want people cutting through the neighborhood, but they are public streets, and a lot of that traffic we're not able to do as part of our survey. We weren't able to tell where those cars came from. Some of those people may be people who already live in East Silver Spring and stopped using Grove Street and started using Houston Street. They might not be really what you would consider cut-through traffic. They're going from DC to Columbia or something, but it's hard to tell. But certainly we will continue to monitor this neighborhood as this project is constructed, and if additional changes are warranted, we can certainly take a look at those. So with that, I'm going to end the formal part of the presentation part of the meeting, and we will allow you, those of you who are in the room, to view the boards. If you attended on the Zoom, it's going to end momentarily, but all the information that is displayed in this room is available on our project webpage. So you could view those displays there. If you have any trouble finding that webpage or any trouble downloading anything, just email me, matt.johnson@montgomerycountymd.gov, and we'll get it troubleshooted for you. And for those of you in the room and on the Zoom, I just want to thank you for taking the time this evening to join us. I know there's a lot of things you could be doing, like sitting in front of a fireplace with a cup of hot cocoa today, or anything else. And we appreciate the fact that you decided to come out to East Silver Spring Elementary, either in person or virtual, to join us and talk about making this neighborhood an even better place than it already is. And so I really thank you, and it's great to see all these familiar faces, and I'm sure we'll see you throughout the process as we continue to work. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it, and have a good evening. And we'll be here in the room to answer questions one-on-one. Give me just a moment to turn off the Zoom before you ask me questions, but I'll be here as well. Thank you very much.